Okay, I think we're ready to get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Susanne, and today I'm here to talk to you about how to get shit done. Hopefully, that is. Like I said, my name is Susanne. I'm a software engineer. I've been working in the field of software for about 10 years now, primarily in the Microsoft.NET C# stack. These days I also do a little bit of sort of DevOps and DevOps related stuff, automation, that kind of thing. I also have ADHD, something I wasn't diagnosed with until three years ago now, is it? So up until that point, I had to figure out how to work and actually get stuff done. Outside of work, I am one of those people who has a new hobby about every 3 months or so. At the moment, that happens to be cross-stitch embroidery for some reason. I don't know how that happened, but I kind of like it. I listen to a lot of heavy metal music. I'm guessing the t-shirt might give that away. Play a lot of Diablo 4. These days on PlayStation 5. I did used to be like a PC gamer back in the day, spend a lot of hours in World of Warcraft growing up, for example. So, why am I standing here today talking to you about productivity? I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a neurologist, I don't have a PhD in anything productivity related, or any PhD for that matter. But what I do have is years and years and years of being creative, being inventive, trying to find ways of working to make it through both school, but also, university and the first many years of my career. And a lot of the things I hear from people now, especially since AI has been introduced, is that the things they struggle with in terms of focus and attention and getting things done are really the same things that I'm struggling with. I just happen to struggle before the rest of you did. So that is what this talk is. This is not me giving you 10 ways to use Claude to do things for you. This is battle-tested systems that I've tried over the years, and I'm still using all of these today. So this is like a toolbox. You can take as much or as little from it as you like. There's very little sort of like theory. We're going to talk a little bit about some theory behind attention, but this is primarily a toolbox that I'm hoping will help some of you find a sustainable way of working. So this is what we have on the agenda for today. Again, we're going to talk a little bit about what it is about focus and attention that has become so hard these days. Like, what has happened? Have we, been degrading as human beings and turning into, creatures incapable of deep work? Probably not. We're then going to dive right into the toolkit, starting with the basics, the time management, the energy management, and your sort of overall work environment. We're going to talk about how to get started on large tasks, or, sometimes any task. We're going to talk about procrastination, ways you can sort of get around that to try and get some work done on what you're actually supposed to be doing. Then we're going to talk about what for me is the ultimate boss fight, which is meetings. Meetings requires me to sit still for prolonged periods of time and somehow also take in what's being said, which is a struggle, still to this day, by the way. We're going to talk about task tracking. How do you keep track of what you need to do with all of the constant task switching going on without having to keep it in your working memory all the time? And then we're going to talk about something I really struggle with still, which is taking your attention back from your smartphone. And we're going to wrap it all up, and hopefully there will be questions, time for questions towards the end. It depends on how much I talk, so we'll see. So, why is it that we're struggling with attention now? I mean, if we look at the world today and compare it to what it was like 30 or 40 or 50 years ago, the matter of the fact is that the world has just evolved at an incredible speed, and it has become so much more complicated than it was just 10 or 20 or 30 years ago. Like, try and remember the time before the smartphone, right? Life was a lot simpler back then. Back then, if you were out, walking your dog, that was what you were doing. You weren't also being online on your phone and available for everybody else. We're also consuming an incredible amount of information at a speed that has never been seen before. And all of that means that the world in general has just become a lot more complicated to live in, even down to when you go grocery shopping. 20 or 30 years ago, maybe you had 3 types of cereal to choose from. If you go to the grocery store now, what do you have, 20 or 30 or more sometimes, right? So the world got more complicated. There's really nothing wrong with us. It's just that the world is evolving at a speed where our brains can't really keep up. Because in reality, our brain is like, a 50,000-year-old feature, right? It hasn't really kept up with the evolution that the world around us is seeing. And so this is like a general overview. Like, this is a grossly simplified explanation. You can probably do entire talks on this topic alone. But we tend to think of focus and attention as something we should be able to switch on and off at will, like some sort of magical button, like push it, oh, I'm focused now. But that's not really how it works. The way it really works is more like a balance between competing neural systems inside your brain, and these 4 are sort of the main players in that balance. The prefrontal cortex is sort of the CEO or the project manager. It's responsible for things like decision-making, planning, impulse control, that kind of stuff. Then we have the anterior cingulate cortex. I'm sure I did not pronounce that right. This is the traffic controller. It helps you switch between tasks, also helps you in determining what task is worth switching your attention for. Then we have the striatum, which is like the reward center. This is the part of your brain that sort of, provides you with dopamine, gives you a little dopamine reward every time you tick a little box off of your to-do list or ship code or whatever it is that does it for you. Then we have the amygdala, which is sort of the alarm system, or sometimes also called the security guard. And what can happen if you're under a lot of stress, especially if it is a, let's say, moderate amount of stress, but in prolonged periods of time, is that the amygdala will release cortisol into your brain. Cortisol is a stress hormone. And given enough cortisol over time, the amygdala will eventually hijack control away from your prefrontal cortex. So your capability of doing planning, decision-making, impulse control will lower over time, especially if you're sort of exposed to prolonged stress over time. So, most of you have probably seen a graph like this before, right? The reality is that we do our best work when we're in deep focus mode. And the problem with the world today is that it's very hard to get enough uninterrupted time to get any deep work done. And so this graph says it beautifully, I think, that what seems to be like just a short little interruption is really quite costly in terms of both productivity but also effectiveness. So you can probably imagine it, right? You're sitting here and you're debugging some sort of complex production issue. You have logs open everywhere and some documentation over here and some notes somebody wrote at some point over here, and you're starting to see, okay, there's some sort of thing over here related to something over here. You're starting to form like a hypothesis of what the problem is. And then somebody comes and taps you on the shoulder. Maybe you get an email notification that you just have to check what's in that email or whatever it could be. And by the time you get back to what you were doing, you will have lost most of that sort of mental model you've built of what it is you were doing. So even though you have like bits and pieces of it, maybe you remember there was something about an ID somewhere in some sort of log, the reality is that the majority of it will be gone by then. And so what the brain needs to do is it needs to rebuild that mental model again, mostly from scratch, which is very sort of resource intensive for the brain. In general, everything that the prefrontal cortex does is very resource intensive. And when I say resource, I mean oxygen and glucose and that kind of stuff, which means that it becomes tired very easily, which is why you can sort of say that you get context switched to death, because that's what it feels like. A lot of this during a workday and your brain is just done for. It has no more energy to give. And obviously, if we have to talk about productivity, we also have to talk about AI, right? I mean, AI, in many ways, promises to supercharge your output, do 10 times more in 10 times less time, blah, blah, blah. But the reality is that AI also produces a lot of stuff that you now, as a human, as a developer, engineer, whatever, now have to, read, you have to validate it, maybe you have to reprompt, and you have to look at what it has done without being the one who wrote it, right? Which is actually quite, resource intensive for the brain to do as well. Given all of that, there's also the tendency that we have, or at least I tend to do this. I will start an agent on one task over here, and then I will start another agent on another task here, and then I can be very tempted to start a third agent on a third task somewhere else. And the problem with that is that you then sort of maximize the context switching. Like, if you were thinking you were context switching a lot before, it's nothing compared to this. Given all of that, you can also add the increased expectations, right? We're all feeling it now. With the introduction of AI, we now have to be more effective, we have to be more productive, we have to deliver more in shorter amounts of time. And we also still have to maintain the same quality, right? And if you put all of that together, that is how you end up with AI burnout, which is, by the way, is a thing now. AI burnout is a thing. So what do we do about it? It's not like we can roll back, 10, 20, 30 years of progress, right? We don't have the power to do that, at least not yet, anyway. What we need to do instead is to try and find ways of working where we as human beings aren't burning out in the long run, where we actually feel productive, where we actually get something done. So, let's go straight into the toolkit. The first thing to do would be to try and do some time management. And I'm sure some of you have also heard of this before, right? Book or block focus time in your calendar so that it is scheduled. And a good way to start with this is to do about 1.5 hours, say 3 times a week. It's a place to get started, right? But in reality, you can adjust this to your needs in any way you like. If what you need is an hour at the end of every day, by all means, go ahead and block that. What I've also found very useful is to block time for code reviews and to batch them. Because code reviews now more than ever have become a bottleneck. So we don't want to have our colleagues waiting for us to get things done, right? They don't want to wait 2 days because while we're sitting around like doing something else, they're waiting for us to do something before their tasks can move on, right? And we don't want that. So what I do, what I've found to be a good balance is to schedule it twice a day. So first thing in the morning, that's where I have the most brain power. So let's do all the difficult reviewing something someone else did at that time. And then right after lunch. Sometimes I'll also do it again by the end of the day if there's a lot of it, because I can't do that. I can't review code for like 3 hours straight. Again, you can adapt this to suit your needs in any way you like, really. This one, which is what I call the ramp in and ramp out, is one of the most useful techniques I've applied. And the concept here is you want to give your brain enough time to do the context switching it needs to do without spending as many resources. And essentially that means give it time. So instead of going straight from deep focus code work, set off 5 or 10 minutes before a meeting to just leave yourself a little breadcrumb or write a line of code that will break if you try to build it, so that you know when you get back, oh yeah, right, that was what I was doing. You can do the same when the workday starts and ends. You can do the same before and after lunch. It can really be applied to more or less anything, but it really eases the sort of context switching process. You can also do it yourself if you switch between tasks. I do that as well. I take 5 minutes or so if I have to do a context switch, and then sort of easing the process a little. So these are screenshots from my actual calendar. This is sometimes what it looks like. At other times, because I've been doing this for years now, so I don't have to necessarily block time for ramp in and ramp out. I know instinctively that that's what I should be doing, right? But sometimes, if there is a lot of things going on, I will block my calendar so it looks like this. And as you can see from one of the days, I will sometimes have meetings back to back where I can't really do any sort of easy switching in and out, and you know it is what it is. You'll just have to try and deal with it if that's the case. So, one thing is to manage your time, another is to manage your energy. And for that, I've found the traffic light method to be extremely useful. The concept here is that you want to recharge your own batteries before you bleed them completely dry. And the way you get started with this is you take like a piece of paper or whatever, you write down every single day what you've done, different tasks, and you try to put them into one of these 3 categories. And after 1 or 2 weeks, I would recommend 2 weeks, you look at your sort of results and validate them and see, okay, so what's the status like? What you should be aiming for is somewhere around the percentages here, sort of generally. Some days there will be more red tasks than yellow tasks, you know, that's life, right? But in general, if you can see a pattern here of having half your time spent on red tasks, maybe it's time to try and do something about it. Maybe what you can do is you can offload it to someone else. Maybe you can find a different way of approaching the task that is less draining. Maybe what you can try and do is to make sure there is a little bit of green in between all the red, so that you recharge your battery on a consistent level instead of keep draining it dry. And the beauty of this is that if you do it for your off time, your private time as well, if you then run into periods of time at work where you can't get out of all the red stuff that's going on, you can balance it with green in your free time. That will also work. And the point here, again, is not to have to hit these magical numbers every single day. It's more so about creating balance. Then we have your sort of physical work environment, right? I've AI generated these pictures because I felt like I didn't want to out someone's messy desk at a conference. I felt like that was mean. So these are AI generated, but you can probably see the visual impact, right? That if you have a lot of visual clutter where you're working, your brain needs to take that into consideration, even if you don't think it does. It does. And that also goes for like the office space that you work. If you have a desk that's facing somewhere where people are walking back and forth all the time, that will fall into the same category. I'm not saying you should become like clean desk heroes overnight. What I'm saying is maybe you can just take it and put it into a drawer, or maybe you can take it and put it to the side so it's outside of your direct vicinity, right? And then if you, like me, work a lot from home, I used to fall into the work from the couch trap a lot, which turned out wasn't exactly very productive. So instead I created like a physical space with a desk. Like, this is work, this is where I do work, I don't do anything else here. And it was really just, I was living in a small apartment, right? It was a rug, like about 2 meters times 1.5 meters or so, where there was a desk and a chair, and that was it. Which really helps the brain understand that when I step into this space, this is now work time. When I step out of that space, it's now free time. And it seems silly, but that actually made quite the difference in terms of actually getting things done. I sort of knew instinctively when I sat down at that desk, at that chair, I knew I'm supposed to be working now. So, then we have the problem of the ever-growing amount of open tabs. And I am so bad at this still. I will have opened, like by the end of the workday, I will have 3 or 4 or 5 windows open, full of tabs of all kinds of things, right? I do this constantly. And what ends up happening is it looks like the screenshot above, right? You can't even see what the fuck it is I'm having open, right? So whenever I have to go back and find something, I spend 5 minutes looking for it. And sometimes I'll even forget what I was looking for in the first place, which is Not very productive now, is it? So for that, I've sort of implemented 2 rules. One is if I don't need this right now, I can close it. If I do need it, I put it into a tab group. And tab groups will be called different things in different browsers. I believe tab stacks or tab islands are also some of the terms it goes by. But you can probably visually see how much it clears up your browser space. It also means that you can put your sort of open tabs into different categories or belonging to different tasks, meaning that going back and forth between tasks, if you have to, becomes a lot easier. It becomes easier to find what is relevant for that specific task. And the beauty of it, at least if you're using Chrome, which I am, so I'm using their tab groups, is that if I close my browser and shut down my laptop by the end of the day and turn it on the next day, it will still remember all of these tab groups, which is great. Because in the event that there is some sort of production outage where I have to, throw away what I'm doing right now and go, help somewhere, I can go back to what I was doing fairly easily, which is really nice. So, sometimes we do know what we're supposed to be doing, right? But the task in front of us is so big that we just can't really, it looks like a mountain and we don't want to start climbing that mountain, right? Or, sometimes it's any task, really. Sometimes getting started is quite hard. So the first tactic here, this is also a very known one. It's called Eat the Frog. And this works especially well because what you will do is when you get into work, you will try to identify whatever is the hardest or most difficult task that day. And that is the task you will start by doing. And this is good because you tend to have more sort of mental bandwidth in the beginning of the day that you have towards the end. And we as human beings also tend to consistently underestimate how long things take. So if we think the frog task is 1 hour, it's probably going to be 1.5 hours, right? So that also means that you can do your frog task and still have time left towards the day to get other stuff done. Sometimes you might realize that your frog task is really like a month-long refactor of whatever, right? And in that case, maybe your real frog task of the day is to turn the big frog into smaller frogs. So break it down into smaller tasks, really. Which is totally fine for a frog task. Sometimes I will come into the office, I will attempt to use the Eat the Frog tactic and realize that I'm getting nowhere. If that is the case, I will tend to use this method, which is the snowball method. So the concept here is that whenever you get little things done, when you can check small things off of your to-do list, your brain will reward you with a little shot of dopamine, which is great because dopamine also builds motivation. And so instead of just sitting there staring at that task that you cannot seem to get started with, go somewhere else and do something simple. Like a couple of small things, get some momentum going, and let that momentum carry you into the larger task. And if it is a real struggle, this is a really, really effective method. The concept behind this is that typically getting started is the hard part. So what I usually do is I set a timer, typically for 5 minutes, and then I say, okay, I only have to do this for 5 minutes. Surely I can do this for 5 minutes, right? I can open my code editor. I can do that in 5 minutes. And what typically happens is that once you get started, you just sort of keep on rolling. Case in point is when I had to start the preparations for this PowerPoint, which you can imagine takes quite a lot of time to do. So when you start out doing it, it looks like this huge mountainous task, right? So on a Sunday where I had no other plans, I set my timer for 2 hours because 2 hours felt manageable. I was like, okay, I can do 2 hours, I can do that. And what ended up happening is I got into really good flow, and I spent about 5 hours working on it instead. So the problem was more so getting started than it was to actually do the work, right? And that is where this is really useful. You can set it to 5 minutes, it can be 15, it can be an hour, it doesn't matter. It needs to be something where you're like, okay, I can do this for like 10 minutes or whatever. So, moving on to procrastination. There are many different reasons why we procrastinate. We tend to look at it as, a problem of laziness, or you're just not motivated enough, and we tend to think things like, oh, I just need to grow a spine, I need to pull myself together, and no, this has nothing to do with willpower, really. Again, this is a gross simplification, right? But what essentially happens is your brain is trying to protect you from unpleasant feeling of some kind. It can be boredom, anxiety, fear of failure, it can be whatever, really. And so it diverts you into doing something else. It's really trying to help you, except it's not really helpful, at least not all the time. So how do we deal with that? The first strategy for this is to make it as hard as possible to do whatever it is you do to procrastinate. For example, let's say you have a home office and you store all your Legos like in a drawer or whatever in the back of your office. If your favorite procrastination habit is color sorting your Legos, maybe you need to move the Legos out of your office. If the problem is the phone, don't take it into your office as well. Keep it somewhere where you have to actively get up to reach it. This can take many different views, right? It can look many different ways depending on who you are as a person and whatever your favorite procrastination activity is. Mine used to be checking various sort of news sites, developer blogs, LinkedIn, that kind of stuff. And naturally, at first, I made the common mistake of thinking, oh, I'll just install some willpower into myself and I can make myself stop. That did not work at all, whatsoever, in fact. So I thought, okay, so clearly I can't make myself stop, so I need something that can make me stop, that will force me to not do that, to go into these various news sites and whatnot. So I installed a website blocker. The first one I installed was cold turkey, and it's the one I'm using today. I really like this one. Simple, easy to install, easy to use, and incredibly hard to bypass. Can also be customized in various ways if that's what you want to do. So I've had this website blocker installed for about 3-4 years, I think. So I thought, for the purpose of this talk, let's try and disable the website blocker for a couple of months and see what happens. Because will I then feel the urge to, procrastinate with what I was usually doing for procrastination? And no. As it turns out, I don't need the website blocker anymore, which is great, right? Then I procrastinate doing various other things, which I'm then trying to find ways to manage. But the point is, try to make whatever it is you're doing that you're not supposed to be doing as hard as possible. Sometimes that's not possible, and so the other way to look at it would be to say, okay, so I am procrastinating instead of doing whatever. How can I make this whatever, what I'm supposed to be doing, more enjoyable? And this is very individual. You can do whatever floats your boat, really. Maybe it's putting on your favorite music. Maybe it's making your favorite drink. Maybe it's, gamifying it in some way. I think the most important thing is whatever progress you make on what you were supposed to be doing, celebrate it. Even if it is just opening the code base in your editor, it is still progress. You are still a little bit further than you were before, which counts as progress. So celebrate it. Then there's the third strategy, which is flipping the script. And this really has to do with the way we think about tasks. And so this is a little bit more difficult. But in general, we tend to think negative things about tasks we don't want to do. Maybe they're boring. Maybe we're like, ugh, I don't want to review this AI slop, whatever. So we go color sort Legos for 2 hours. You get that, right? And so what happens in the brain when you negatively phrase the task you're supposed to be doing is that you're actually increasing the levels of cortisol in your brain, which also means that impulse control becomes harder. And over time, if you do this enough, it sort of starts to become habit. And the problem with habit is that habits execute before your prefrontal cortex has the chance to tell you that this is not what you're supposed to be doing right now. What you want to do instead is every time you realize that this is happening, try to reframe it. And this is going to feel ridiculous at first, but I promise you it will make a difference. You need to try to frame it in a better way, saying, oh, this review was made by AI. I will become better at reviewing AI-created PRs or whatever. It doesn't really matter, whatever you want to make up, right? And the beauty of the human brain is that it is also very adaptable. So if you think positive things about the tasks you're doing, especially the ones that you used to think negative things of, over time, this will become your new habit, meaning that you will become less prone to procrastinate, simply because they're no longer a threat. Your brain will stop perceiving them as a threat, which means that it's easier to get started on them in the first place. So, meetings. Does anyone in here genuinely enjoy meetings? No shame if you do. Thank you. I wish I was you, really. Good meetings, I'm heard, yeah. So, I hate meetings. I do like the good ones. The good ones are fine. There are just not very many of them now, is there? Generally, we walk out of meetings feeling more drained than when we walked into them, right? And so these strategies are not meant to make you a master meeting participant. This is more meant to help you get out of these meetings in a less sort of tired state. Obviously, the easiest place to start is to remove any sort of distractions. So if you don't need your phone in that meeting, don't bring it. If you don't need your laptop, don't bring that one either. At least, you know, with what you can control. Then what you want to try and do is to keep your brain in an active listening state. What tends to happen if we're passively listening is that after a while, for me that tends to happen after 5 to 10 minutes, my brain will start to drift off, thinking about other things, daydreaming about God knows what pancakes, thinking about the grocery list you need to go grocery shopping later, whatever, right? But asking questions means that you have to actively process the input you're hearing and try to form questions. And I'm not saying bombard the meeting with questions. Just if you have an hour-long meeting, a couple, 3, maybe 4 questions will be fine. It's enough to keep you in a somewhat active listening state, meaning you will process more of it and feel less drained when you get out of the meeting. The same with taking active notes, especially if you take them by hand. It enforces the same thing, especially also if you try to rephrase. So don't just copy what is on the slides, but rephrase it with your own words. Also triggers the same processes in your brain that keeps you in active listening state. Then, obviously, there is the cases where it is a type of meeting where it is listen only. So there's no opportunity to ask questions or whatever. If that's the case, then maybe you can try and do various little things to gamify it, for example. I've done this with colleagues in the past where we've had a competition about who could get the most stars in our notebook. Every time somebody said the word agile, we would write a little star in our meetings, and we would have a competition about who would get the most stars per meeting over every week, and there would be like a candy bar as a reward, which I know it sounds stupid, but it's actually kind of fun. And it means that you're also sort of now having a reason to listen, right? And finally, this also goes with the taking active notes, is to keep your hands busy in some way. It doesn't really matter if it's, you know, flipping a pen around, or if it's, I have a little squishy toy. I like to sit and squish. If you take active notes, you're also keeping your hands busy, right? That also helps you take in what is being said. And I mean, if it's a Teams meeting, you can even, you know, sit and knit if that's what you wanted to do, because nobody can probably tell, right? So, now that we've got all of these things under control, we need to try to also offload some of the keeping track of what we need to do from our sort of working memory, so that we can reserve our working memory for what we actually want to spend it on. And again, task tracking, the simplest way to do this is with some sort of to-do list. And I know this sounds simple, but it is a really, really effective tool. There are various sorts of apps and whatnot out there you can use for this. I use ClickUp. ClickUp has a very nice free tier where you get a lot of the functionality without having to pay for it, and it fulfills my needs. Has a very nice visual board and layout. Todoist is also really nice. I've used that one in the past as well. But in reality, it can be done as simply as a piece of paper. So what you want to do is, rather than having your brain trying to remember all of the things that you need to do, you want to offload it onto paper so that, well, one, you probably won't forget about it, and two, your brain will then stop spending mental resources trying to keep track of what it was you were supposed to do. The other strategy for this is to use a prioritization matrix. Because sometimes, especially if we're a little stressed as well, figuring out what the most important thing to be working on, what that task is, can become really hard, especially if you work in a type of environment that has a sort of busy culture. Like everything is really urgent and it needs to happen right now. If you ask someone in such a place to prioritize tasks, they'll just tell you all of it is important and leave it up to you, right? If that's the case, I've found this is the Eisenhower prioritization matrix to be extremely useful. I use it both for work, but also for my private life, to try and figure out what is the most urgent thing right now. And this can also be, there are various tools for it, but I just use a whiteboard at home. At work, I tend to just use a piece of paper. Works fine. What it does is it forces you to look at all of the tasks that you have and sort of weigh them against each other. Like, what is it I really need to be doing right now? Because a lot of the time there are things that feel urgent, but aren't really. And this helps identifying them. It helps make it clear what your priorities are, which offloads some of the sort of brain sort of background processes where it's trying to keep track of all these things for you. So, onto the smartphone, or as I like to call it, a weapon of mass distraction. I have a very complicated relationship with my smartphone. I know I need it, especially I'm from Denmark, right? We need smartphones because everything is digital now. But I have a very strained relationship with it. Again, this is very overall. You could probably do entire conferences on the problems of smartphones, right? But these are sort of the three main reasons that we have such a hard time letting go of our phones. The first one is the magical maybe. It is the fact that notifications aren't arriving on a specific schedule, meaning that it starts to function a little bit like a slot machine. So your brain rewards you with dopamine whenever you get a notification, but after a while, it is the anticipation of the notification that releases dopamine, which means that your brain will now start a constant background process where it is sort of monitoring, is something going on the phone or not? There's been studies done on this, where you would put people in a room and you would put all of their phones in a box and put it off to the side. And as long as the phone was in the room, even if you can't directly see it, people were still sort of mentally spending resources, keeping track of whether or not there was a notification. And then, if you finally do get a notification and you turn around to check on your phone or reply to the email or whatever, you have to do a task switch, or rather your brain has to do a task switch. And task switching is, again, resource intensive, costs a lot in terms of oxygen, glucose, and whatnot. So if you do this a lot, it exhausts your brain's resources, which you probably want to spend on something else. But also, this over time becomes habit. There's a saying that neurons that fire together wire together, which is, largely true. So if you do this enough over time, especially, if you tend to pick up your phone when you're bored, as soon as your brain connects the picking up of the phone to any specific activity or specific feeling, it will become habit. And the problem with habit is that all that you do that is habit happens before your prefrontal cortex can tell you that you shouldn't. Meaning that you will very often sort of feel a little hijacked. You'll think, I should use my phone less, and yet there you are with the phone again, right? Before you even realized it. It happens all the time. And obviously there are ways to deal with this. Again, very obvious, but seriously, this helps. I have no notifications on anything except a few select things, such as phone calls from my mother, which are always important. But seriously, look at all of your notifications, right? Your banners, the vibration, the sounds, all of it, and just turn all of it off if it isn't, actually important. Obviously, it's important to, reply to a friend on Discord or reply to this or that email from your boss or whatever. But the world will probably not end if you don't do this right now. Maybe it can wait an hour or two. Maybe that's fine, right? And so, after a while, if you don't really have any notifications on, the sort of constant background check will start to ease. Like you will start to not feel as drawn to it anymore. Because now there are very few notifications happening, if any at all. Then you can also go the extra mile. Like I said, I have a very complicated relationship with my smartphone. I think that was four years ago or so, I started realizing I spent a lot of time on my phone when I was really intended to do something else. And again, I tried I just need to pull myself together and grow a spine, blah, 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 which, again, did not work whatsoever. So I figured maybe what I need is like screen-free time, but in a way where I can't access the phone. Because I tried the thing where, you put it in a drawer. Yeah, my brain doesn't give two shits about that. It'll just go and pick it up in the drawer before I even realized that was what I was doing, right? So I went ahead and I bought a large box because I figured, okay, if we're doing this, we're going to do all of it. So I bought a large box where I put in my phone, my laptop, the PlayStation controllers, the TV remote, and any other sort of device that I would typically use as a distraction mechanism, and lock it away for 1 hour. And I mean, I did not expect it to be as hard as it was. So for the first week, that has to be the most uncomfortable I've ever felt in my entire body. Like I was almost crawling out of my own skin. Like I had this thought that I would, sit and, I don't know, do crossword puzzles or do some housework or read a book or, whatever. But for the first week, I wasn't able to just sit down and do anything for that 1 hour. Instead, I was just sort of walking around, sort of hovering. I even put the box in a different room, and sometimes I would find myself walking into that room not knowing why I went in there, even if it was locked away, right? So, fortunately for me, it became better after the first week. After about 6 months, I didn't need to lock the phone away anymore. I can just put it in a drawer now. I will still occasionally do this if I start to feel hijacked a little, if I start to feel like the phone is taking control of me rather than the other way around. I will still do this. I also really recommend get it out of your bedroom if you can, or at least away from your immediate reach, so it isn't on the bedside table next to you. Mine, for example, is in a little holder by the door, so it can still charge. I can still use it as an alarm clock, but I'm not able to reach it from bed. Which means that instead of spending 30, 40 minutes or an hour every night randomly Googling all kinds of shit, I now actually read a book every night for about half an hour, which is incredibly nice, and my sleep quality has improved immensely, which also helps in terms of focus and productivity, The same for work. If you can, keep it out of reach. It makes it a lot easier to resist the urge if it is not in your immediate sight. Like just putting it off to the side will make a difference. So, if you do need to use your phone every now and then, which most of us probably do, maybe what you want is to have a type of app that can either block you from using specific apps or create enough friction that what is habit then becomes an active choice. There are many different apps for this out there. You can, go and see what suits your needs. My favorite here is called OneSec. These are screenshots from my actual phone, where my Chrome app is my most used app because I really like to Google things. Like I'll get some sort of idea, which spawns some Googling of things, and then that spawns more Googling of things, and then before I know it, an hour has passed. Like I don't really do doom scrolling, I do doom Googling. So when I installed this app, that was about middle of December, I think, so I've had it installed for 6 months. My average daily usage of the Chrome app was 3 hours, which came as a shock to me. I thought I was pretty good at not using my phone so much. I guess I wasn't. And fast forward to now, my average is about 45 to 50 minutes per day, down from 3 hours. And that is all from what this app does, which is creating friction. So what happens if I try to open my Chrome app is I'll be met with this whole, it's time to take a deep breath. And sometimes inside I'll be like, I'll show you how to take a deep breath, you little... Like, it still annoys me, so clearly I still need it, right? But it forces me to wait 8 seconds. And then it asks me, do you actually want to open this app or not? If you say, yeah, I do want to open this app, maybe you need to Google something specific or, I don't know, look up ticket prices for something, I don't know. It will force you to make an active choice about how much time you want to spend on that app. The maximum here is 15 minutes, meaning that if I go do what I was supposed to do and then somehow end up doom Googling anyway, it will stop me after 15 minutes and present me with the same choices again. And this has become really, really helpful. As in, this has freed up more than 2 hours every single day for me that I can then spend on something else. And I also feel more in control, I would say. So, you've made it all the way through and nobody looks asleep, so that's good. If you start embarking on this journey of trying to be more productive, trying to take ownership of your own focus and your own attention, expect to fail at some point because this shit is hard. Like, there are many, many, many books written about this subject for a reason, right? It is not easy, especially not since the introduction of AI and the smartphone and whatnot. This is even harder. The point here is that if you fail, just take it as a learning, get back up on the horse and try again. Maybe you need to adjust what you've been doing a little bit to fit the way you function in a different way. It's also important to say that, in general, we tend to think that everybody else is like super productive and super focused all the time, constantly. They're not. Because in reality, this is more what it looks like, right? We're human beings, we're not robots, at least not yet. And so things around us, like the world, the tasks that we have, what happens with our family and things like that, all affects how productive and how effective we are. Like, if your kids have woken you up 5 times a night for 2 months straight, there is no amount of productivity apps that will help you. I mean, that type of sleep deprivation for prolonged periods of time, there's just no really making up for that, which is fine. Like, nobody has to be 100% productive every single day. So, if you take anything away from this talk, I want it to be this: hack the shit out of your own life. Seriously, I'm telling you, if you want to change something, if you want to improve something, be creative about it. Be inventive. Try to find ways of making it work so that you get the progress that you want. Case in point here from my own life is I hate exercise. Like, I find it incredibly boring. I've tried various types of sports and going to the gym and whatnot, and I mean, I'll last 2 to 3 months, and then I'll be bored by it, and then I'll end up not going. And we all know that, you know, exercise is really good for you. You should be doing it because it will help you, you know, be more productive and more focused, and your body will also be healthy and blah blah blah. So I started thinking, can I connect exercise to like something I have been doing for a long time on a consistent basis that I actually like doing, which is gaming. I considered getting one of those like PlayStation VR headsets and figured maybe that was a little expensive to start with in case I hated it. So I ended up instead buying one of those like foldable exercise bikes, the ones that you can fold and then put under the couch when you don't use it. And what happens now is that I spend about an hour, 5 or 6 times a week on my exercise bike while playing Diablo 4. And I don't even have to pull myself together to do it now, because now it's actually fun. As opposed to before, where I had to, sometimes spend 2 hours like pulling myself together to get out to go to the gym, right? And it's such an easy solution that I for years hadn't considered, because everything was like, oh, exercise is something you go somewhere to play tennis or you go to the gym, right? Nobody at any point had like presented this idea to me that this was possible. So be creative about it. Try to find ways to make it work. Try different things, see what works for you, so that you can make the changes you want. And finally, this also correlates with what Richard said, which is make sure to go outside, relax a little, make sure that you live your life. I mean, life is not meant to be optimized to death. You're not meant to be 100% productive every single second of every single day. Instead, make sure that there's also time for doing all the other things that makes you happy, also things that might be wasteful. It doesn't matter. The point is that you're supposed to live your life, not over-optimize it. And you do you. If what you want to do is to build Lego in your basement or color sort your pen collection, it's fine. Just make sure that there's time for this, that you take the time to do these things. Because keeping up with all the things that's happening within our industry, especially right now, is almost a full-time job in and on its own, right? So make sure that you also take time to live. With that is the end of my talk. I've included a feedback QR code here, which I would very much appreciate if you do. There's also some rating system going on down here. I've also included a QR code for my LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me there.